Hi, everyone. Next session is cost optimization. And hey, I've been blown away by the sessions so far today. We've had some great sessions focusing on AI and future trends. This session is going to focus on how you can adopt these technologies without breaking the bank. The fact is, most organizations don't have great visibility into what SaaS apps and cloud workloads they're running. And as a result, they're spending more than they need to. In fact, estimates of wasted cloud spend for organizations without strong cost management hover around 30%. And wide adoption of AI and other technologies is only going to exacerbate this trend. AI generally drives really large data requirements. So I'm delighted to have 3 panelists here with exciting new technologies to help us to optimize the hybrid cloud. But before I introduce them, I'm Amy Strader. I'm the Director of Hybrid Cloud Optimization here at EVOTEK. Prior to EVOTEK, I worked at Microsoft, where I was responsible for bringing new customers to the Azure cloud. And I actually started my career working with NASA on applied AI for onboard spacecraft diagnostics. So this MTEK session is taking me back to my roots a bit. And with me today, I'm happy to have Seth from Zluri, Jay from Granica, and Sasha from Ternary.
I'm the co-founder and CEO of Ternary. Great to be on the panel here. We are an enterprise FinOps platform, and what we do is we help companies spend to plan with their cloud budgets. We ingest all of the data across their multiple clouds. We present it, we allow them to attribute it at scale. We help them understand its efficiency, and then we offer cost savings optimization suggestions with the workflow on top of that. So Ternary's mission is to help companies spend to plan in the cloud.
Sounds great. Okay, Sethu.
Sure, thanks, Amy, and thanks, Jay and Sasha. Hey, everyone, my name is Sethu. I'm the co-founders of Zluri. And what do we do at Zluri? We help companies discover, optimize, and automate their SaaS stack. So we're fundamentally a SaaS management platform. We help companies save up to 30% of the software spend. Most important need of the hour in these times we live in. So think about being part of this panel today. We'll talk more as we go on.
All right, sounds great. Well, I'm going to start with a softball question. So in your experience, what challenges do organizations face in managing costs in their hybrid cloud environments? And Sasha, maybe you could comment on that first.
Sure. So the first thing I would say that when you move to the cloud, what you're really doing is you're taking the decision to spend money on your infrastructure, and you're shifting it from central finance and engineering leadership to the edge of your organization, to developers who have an API to spin up infrastructure. And really that's an API to spend money on ungoverned. And so we want our developers to have this, but we also want to give them guardrails. And so there's a natural dynamic we should all be aware of as we either are born in the cloud with new companies or migrate to the cloud. And so we kind of want to be aware of this and have tooling in place, whether it's build your own or you buy it from a third-party vendor, or you take advantage of what the cloud providers offered. But you want to understand the dynamic, you want to track it, you want to do everything possible to spend to plan, because 80% of companies that operate in the cloud overspend their budgets, and they have tons of efficiency in their system.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like visibility is a key. I don't know, Sethu, I know your technology really helps provide visibility on SaaS apps, does it not?
Yes, and lots of companies immediately jump to, when they have this problem, how can we save money in the cloud? And I think that companies that are perhaps a bit more mature in their perspective will ask themselves, how efficient is my spend today? And to understand how efficient it is, I want to ingest it. I want to attribute it properly. I want to, divide the cloud spend into the widget that I produce. And then, and only then, is it a fruitful conversation to go to engineers and product managers and tell them, here's how much money we need to save in the cloud so we can be more efficient. That's a much more productive conversation. So the visibility component is absolutely key and the first step on the road to spending to plan.
Yeah, and Sethu, on the SaaS app side, visibility is also an important consideration, is it not?
Absolutely. So we live in the world of what Gartner calls shadow IT. So most of the applications that employees today use, the central IT team is not even aware of that. And that number stands at a staggering 70%, right? And if you own the experience of employees through the technology stack, and you're not even aware of 70% of that, then it's probably a pretty hard problem for you to get the day started with. And that's the first problem that we help companies solve with, is to give visibility into the apps, users, usage across the entire organization without having to go to the end user and asking what they're doing, which means we can do it 100% automatically using central systems. And maybe just another way to look at this is uh, today people think, hey, anything with SSO, I think we can discover, right? Which is a formally assigned SSO in a company, can be, let's say, an Azure AD, an Okta, one of these systems. But the thing is, 70% of the applications that employees use are living outside of this. And when a SaaS company becomes large enough, they become a pseudo SSO, as I call it. Pseudo SSOs could be today GitHub, Salesforce, not primarily SSO application, but when it becomes so big enough that people get so used to operating in those systems that they eventually end up accessing all the other applications via the pet peeve app, depending on which department they are in. And that's causing a ton load of shadow IT. And I don't think that's ever going to stop. And I think that visibility is something that we help companies with. And I think that becomes a starting point towards your optimization journey.
Yeah, it's kind of a yin and a yang, right? I mean, part of the reason people go to the cloud is for flexibility, but when you give people flexibility, it enables shadow IT, right?
Yeah, it's a fine balance between agility and where you draw the guardrails. I don't want to call it gates, but guardrails, right? So I think that's the that's the fine balance between both. So when even IT folks, when they speak to us, and all of them, head of engineering, they speak to us, how do I have some kind of level of control, but without fiddling around with agility? So I think, I don't think we'll ever get to a discussion or end state with that discussion today, but that's what's battling between the end user and the IT team that enables the experience between all of them.
Yeah. And that brings me to, it feels like these days everything has to be AI enabled. And I know some of your technologies are even AI enabled. But leaving aside the question of whether these solutions are really using AI or just using the buzzword, one place where we see organizations struggling to achieve ROI on their AI projects. So Jay, I'd just like you to comment, what are some of the factors influencing the ROI on an AI project? And what are one or two tangible actions that folks can take to improve this?
Yeah, it's a good point, Amy. In fact, I was just talking with another sales leader yesterday who, was sharing a story with me. As he's in the AI space, conversational AI. And as he's speaking with customers, a lot of the sentiment is, I feel like the tools are really, really strong, but I don't quite know how to think about the ROI. Do I have the right data? Is my data protected from sensitive or PII information? Bias and hallucinations are big concerns, right? And so I think how we think about the ROI of an AI project or deploying AI in an environment probably needs to evolve an awful lot, to the point where we're still grappling with how to think about cloud, right? To Sasha's point, costs keep going up. We have to have conversations about, should we be doing this? Shouldn't we? Is it worth it? Because it's all a variable cost model. And so I think, communication is always the biggest thing in business. So how do we bring the engineering teams and the business units together to talk about, what is the purpose of the project? What type of resources will it consume? Do we have the right data, or do we need to go out and source it? And if so, how? But I really, what we're seeing, again, from talking to colleagues and talking to clients on our own, is this concern that I may use data that I shouldn't. And I may build something that works, but then as it turns out, it's actually costing us more money than it's producing in terms of benefit. I just don't think we have great tools right now to help people figure all of that out.
Yeah, still in early stages, right? And I think, that sort of begs the question, at what point should an organization start to care about cost or optimization? Where does it make sense to start investing in tools? Any rules of thumb? I hear companies say, hey, we only have, $30,000 of cost a month. Maybe it's too early to think about. Does anyone have a point of view on this?
Yeah, let me take that initially. I think the best philosophy is you should have principles upon which you build your company and your team and your product. And I think that if you can embed thinking about efficiency from the start with development teams, with product teams, then you'll have a much better chance at success as you scale. We've encountered tons of startups that didn't do that, and they only contact us when their spend has gotten so far out of control that it's affecting their company's bottom line. And of course, lots of startups get credits from Google and Amazon and Azure, right? And they think of it as lottery money, like not real money, but they run out of it quickly. And we've seen some companies, run massive, Vertex jobs, and run out of it in a single weekend. And so I think the answer, at least from my perspective, given everything I've seen, is start early, do it on principle, and you'll have a much better chance at success as you evolve how you approach it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I've heard that, if we could get to the place where cost was just another dimension that we were building into our engineering practices, like security has become, it would lead to better practices overall. Given that you start early, I mean, if an organization has recognized that they want to do something to manage their SaaS apps or their cloud costs, maybe even folks on this call, what are the first steps that you would recommend to kind of get a handle on this?
Yeah, I think the first thing you have to do is just have an honest assessment of where you are, right, and what your priorities are. Because when you think of cloud optimization, it is cost for sure. Are we paying for things we shouldn't be? Are we storing things we shouldn't? But actually, a lot of folks I talk to end up throwing away things that they didn't want to throw away, and they're fearful that they're going to need them at some point. And so I think optimization has to focus again on what are our upcoming priorities, and do we have the right data? Is it accessible? And can we afford to keep it in an active tier so our models can run against it, or are there tools that can help us do that? Because like, I agree with Sasha. It's easy to say you got to start early. It's sort of like the storage room in our basement, right? If you don't clean it out periodically when you move, it is a big project and it is very, very painful, right? So you got to start early, but I think really the big focus has to be on taking an honest assessment of where you are and where you're headed next and what you need in order to get there, again, as a business unit and as an engineering team, so that we can deliver together.
That's great, Jay. And I think you're right. You start with really the principles of your business, and, is what you're doing aligned to your business goals? I don't know, Sethu, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of points, right? So I think the way I tell to all the customers I speak to is governance is always an afterthought, right? I think it's never really something that the people are very proactive about thinking of it, and that's where things start to, which anyway is a problem, right? The second point I want to make is I think from a at least, I mean, mistakes happen. So at least from where do you start? People want to know that, right? I think from what I've seen, at least with respect to SaaS applications, I think when the spend starts to go closer towards $2 million a year, I think people start to say, okay, now what do I do? Because they know that's not going to come down. So let me start putting some kind of a governance framework, a tool, or a process by the time it gets to $3 or $4 million, right? And I think that way they can have some kind of a control and governance. So I think that's how I've seen companies adopt it. Or from an employee count perspective, when a company starts to cross the 200, 250-ish mark, I think that's where things start to break. So I think that becomes sort of a teenage to adulthood kind of a grow up stage for a company itself. And I think that's good time to put in some governance in place, which is where platforms like ours come into picture.
Okay. Yeah. So don't let governance be an afterthought, but maybe don't write all the rules before you get started.
Absolutely. Very well covered it.
Okay. So, one final question. I mean, as technologists and tool vendors, I think we all would agree that technology is critical in managing a hybrid cloud environment. But technology by itself can only go so far. So I wonder if you have any advice on steps an organization needs to take to build a culture of accountability around people, processes, as well as tools.
Yeah, maybe I'll take that.
Okay.
So I mean, any of the products that we bring in today is basically a means to an end. That by itself is not an end, right? So I think without a company taking some of Jay's ideas, what he said is, without knowing what you want to get to or what you want to outcome is, there's no point putting systems and process in place. So I think the way we talk about it is, we first help customers with visibility as a first pain point, right? But sometimes even before starting, customers say, I want to save money. What do I do? So we say, hey, everything starts with diagnostics, right? The human body, and only then you start taking the medicine and whatever you want to. And you do not go to the entire extent of taking your pills for over 7-day period without knowing what's happening, right? So I think the whole thing about understanding what my problem is, for that, what my problem is and how should I solve for it, and for that, what process should I have, and for that, to support the process, what tools should I have. I think that's a better framework for people to understand and implement. And I think whenever customers have taken that approach and they work with at least us, we've seen a retention and success both ways.
That sounds, yeah, I can't really disagree with anything you said there. Sasha, anything to add to that around building a culture of accountability?
Yes, I think finding tools that have workflow in them that allow you to assign responsibility is super helpful. And then I think that from a motivational perspective, going to a group of engineers and telling them to save some money usually doesn't work very well. But if you go to engineers and you ask them to make things more efficient, that is a language that they understand, right? So finding a way to translate what you're trying to get done in a way that they can hear it, I think is super helpful.
Amy, if I could just add to what I just heard Sasha say, like, I think the FinOps framework is really good to sort of address this question in this way. I watched an event a couple months ago, and this one gentleman was saying, every time we told folks we had to cut costs by the end of the quarter by X, nothing really happened. But the minute we made it a daily thing where we showed every day where we were trending towards that target, they hit it. And it sounds crazy. A, you've got to measure it, but B, you have to make it small enough that people can take an action and have an impact, instead of just thinking by the end of the year, by the end of the quarter, we need to achieve this, where you feel like, Sethu will take care of that. I don't have to do anything this quarter. He'll eat up that savings and I'll think about it next quarter. And when everybody thinks that way, you don't get an outcome. So I think that framework is super helpful to address that culture of accountability.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm hearing from both of you is it's about make it manageable for the people, have workflows that will allow you to pass along the right actions to the right team and make those actions small enough, or make the problem small enough that it's solvable and it doesn't become, the attic that you've been shoving things into for the last 20 years. And even the thought of going through it is really daunting. So.
It might be a great AI assistant. We don't know, to just prompt you every once in a while.
Well, I do think AI is a place where it's going to, both be something that we're optimizing toward. And I'm sure all of you are looking at AI as part of the offerings that you have to help provide, stronger suggestions over time. So,
yeah.
I think with that, we're at the end of our time. Does anyone have any closing remarks that they'd like to share with the audience before we move on?
I think really just, what you mentioned, like there are lots of tools. You're going to do a lot of looking at tools, but at the end of the day, spend as much time, if not more, looking at your data sets and making sure you're ready to drive the outcomes you want. A lot of the tools will get the job done, but if you don't have the right data, you're just not getting very far.
Good advice. Sethu, any last words?
Yes, and I think I keep telling this to everyone. So I think the best example for all of this is a human body, right? I think so I keep telling this to most people I speak to. I think when we help companies, we just don't want to be the pill for the fever you've got, but I think we want to be the Fitbit or the Apple Watch, so that you don't become or experience the same illness again, right? I think that's a better behavior. I think all of us make mistakes and we spend, but I think today's times we live in a very, very different than what it was even 2 years ago. So I think the best way to think about this is long term. So systems, process in place, so that you don't repeat the same mistakes again is super important than what has happened in the past.
Yeah, I love that. Fitbats have made us all a lot more conscious of like what we're doing on a daily basis. So it's a great analogy. Sasha, any last words?
Whoops.
I guess not.
That's a message.
It's a mic drop, right? It's the webinar version of a mic drop.
All right. Well, hey, thank you all very much. And thanks, Sasha, remotely for being a part of this conversation. I think this is a fascinating topic, and I really appreciate your time. And thanks, everyone in the audience, for your participation. I'd like you to hold on. We're going to take a short break, and our next session promises to be really terrific. So we'll be back again in a few minutes. And thanks very much, everyone, for joining.
Thanks, Amy.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, everyone.